militarily and he was strong spiritually. And Jehoshaphat had riches and honor. This is in chapter 18, verse 1. Riches and honor in abundance, and by marriage he allied himself with Ahab. Ahab was one of the most wicked men. He was king of Israel. He should have been a righteous man because he was king of God's people. And yet Ahab was married to Jezebel, and they were a wicked, wicked couple. Jezebel was a Phoenician, and she brought her idol gods, and her husband Ahab bowed to her and to her gods and led God's people astray. Now here's good King Jehoshaphat thinking politically, not spiritually. See, he's not perfect, but he's thinking, I'll just make an alliance with King Ahab, and that will reunite Judah and Israel because they've been divided. And he thought that the two of them could be allied by marriage, and that invited great trouble that would come to them into the future as the offspring of the house of Omri and Ahab would bring a woman to the throne of Judah, which was not God's plan. He wanted kings to rule from the sons of David. But we find that when we go astray and go our own way instead of seeking out God, we run into trouble every time. And so we find that this alliance brought them to a desire that Ahab wanted. He wanted to go to Ramoth Gilead and conduct a war. And yet he wasn't sure about it. So he said, let's gather all the prophets of God and let them prophesy. And all these prophets had seen how wicked Ahab was, and they were afraid. So they just told Ahab the king what he wanted to hear, not the truth. And what he wanted to hear was that God was going to support him as he and Jehoshaphat went to war against Ramoth Gilead. And so that's what they said. They encouraged him to go to battle, you'll succeed. But it wasn't the truth. Sometimes we don't want to hear the truth. And they searched out for one more prophet. Is there not another prophet? And indeed there was. There was the prophet Micaiah. And Ahab said, I hate him. Let me read the verse. This is in verse 7 of 2 Chronicles 18. So the king of Israel, Ahab, said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, there is still one man by whom we may inquire of the Lord, but I hate him, because he never prophesies good concerning me, but always evil. He is Micaiah, the son of Imlah. And Jehoshaphat said, let not the king say such things. Jehoshaphat was a good king, and he didn't want to hear the king of Israel saying that he hated a man, a prophet of God. But he hated him because he told him the truth. He told him what he didn't want to hear. Some people hate preachers because preachers preach the truth from the Bible, and they don't want to hear that. They want to hear something that tickles their ears. In fact, some people will draw away such teachers and people to themselves having itching ears, and they will want things preached in a smooth and clear and good way that sounds good to their ears. In other words, they want to be able to be told by God that somehow they can sin and have God's favor also. But it doesn't work that way. Micaiah told the truth, but before he did, he used a little sarcasm. Because they said, go get Micaiah, let him, and I called him Micaiah. I had a Bible teacher that called him that, but I think it's Micaiah. But Micaiah, the prophet, was asked, shall we go to war against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I refrain? So he's going to use a little sarcasm. He's going to tell them what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. He's not lying here. He's going to make his point. So he said, go ahead, go and prosper, and they shall be delivered into your hand. But King Ahab knew that wasn't true, even though all those other prophets said, go ahead, you're going to win this war. But he knew Micaiah would tell him the truth, even if he hated him, even if he didn't want to hear the truth. So the king, King Ahab, verse 15, said to him, how many times shall I make you swear that you tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord? Then he said, now here's the truth. He said, King Ahab, I saw all Israel scattered on the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let each return to his house in peace. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, did I not tell you that he would not prophesy good concerning me, but evil? See, Ahab knew it. Ahab knew that he would be the one prophet who would say, don't go to war. God's not going to bless you in this. He's going to scatter you. He's going to defeat you. He wanted to be told, go ahead and go into battle. You'll be victorious. So he hated the prophet. Someone has said, rightfully, and observed this, that instead of listening to the truth, they persecute the messenger. They used to kill the prophets. Jesus condemned the people of his generation, saying that they were the sons of the fathers who had killed the prophets and stoned those who had been sent to them. He said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how often I would have gathered you together as a mother hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing, thou who killest the prophets and stonest those who were sent to you." O Jerusalem, he cried over that city in Matthew 23. Because Jesus knew the truth of the fact that when people don't want to hear the truth, they'll persecute the prophet or the messenger, like they persecuted Jeremiah, like they persecuted Daniel, and like they persecuted so many, like Isaiah and many of the prophets. Because people that are bent on doing evil don't want to hear the truth. Are we like that? Would we ever be so rebellious to God that we would read the scripture that it tells us what God's will is, and we close the Bible and say, that's not for me. I'll do it my way. Remember Elvis? Remember Frank Sinatra? They had their song, and so many others have sang that song, I did it my way. Well, we need to remember the words of Jeremiah 10, verse 23. O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself who walks. The man who walks, the way is not in himself. But he says that, like the psalmist in Psalm 119, verse 105, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And so when we look back at what they're doing here, they're listening to a prophet who's telling them don't go to war. But guess what they did? They went to war anyway. Jehoshaphat dressed up as a king because he was king of Judah. And he was allied with wicked King Ahab. Ahab had a plan. He said, I'm not going to dress up like a king. I'm going to disguise myself like a soldier. Was he being brave? Was he being wise? Or was he being a coward? Well, here's what happened. The king of Syria and Ramoth-Gilead, they came down into this battle and with the orders, don't go after anyone but the king. In other words, go get Ahab. He started all of this. Let's cut the head off the snake, as it were. And so they started looking for the king, and the only one dressed like a king was the king of Judah. And Jehoshaphat said, I'm not the king of Israel. I'm not him. Don't kill me. And so they didn't kill Jehoshaphat, but they did look everywhere for King Ahab. And randomly, there was a certain man, this is verse 33. Now a certain man drew a bow at random and struck the king of Israel between the joints of his armor. So he said to the driver of his chariot, turn around and take me out of the battle, for I'm wounded. Ahab thought he had escaped detection, and a random arrow struck him. That may have been random from that man who just shot it into the air. But don't you see the providence of God and how that arrow hit exactly the right place on the right person? Ahab, the wicked king, needed to die. The battle increased that day, and the king of Israel propped himself up in his chariot, facing the Syrians until evening, and about the time of sunset, he died. That's the end of Ahab. But Jehoshaphat survived, and he continued to be the king of Judah, and he returned safely to his house in Jerusalem. That's in chapter 19 of 2 Chronicles. But I want us to focus now on chapter 20, especially during this time when we're quarantined because of the coronavirus. I think we'll see something here that will be a great encouragement and a challenge to all of us. Here we have the people of Ammon and the people of Moab challenging Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, to war. Now the Ammonites and the Moabites, these were people that were kin to the people of Judah. They were descendants of Lot, who was a nephew of Abraham. Of course, we know Israel and Judah descended from Abraham, but the Moabites and the Ammonites, they descended from Lot. And so they're kin to one another. They're cousins, as it were. And yet these nations had grown to, now they're going to battle against one another. The godless Ammonites and the godless Moabites are making war against Jehoshaphat. And they were waiting for the king down at En-Gedi. Back in 2007, I went to Israel and got to go to En-Gedi. That's an oasis. David spent some time at En-Gedi. But here the armies were gathering in great multitude to go against Jehoshaphat. And Jehoshaphat feared and set himself, now watch this, to seek the Lord. That's verse 3. And he proclaimed a fast throughout Judah. How many of the wicked kings went and found other kings to try to fortify their political and military strength? And yet Jehoshaphat did the right thing. He had had enough of these bad alliances that he tried that and failed. So now he's seeking the Lord and proclaiming a fast among his people. So Judah gathered together to ask help from the Lord, verse 4, and from all the cities of Judah they came to seek the Lord. And here's a king leading people in a spiritual way. Our president and our vice president have asked us to pray. Our vice president has been heading the president's task force against this coronavirus, and yet he's been mocked in the media. He's been mocked by American citizens. He asked Americans to pray. He led prayer, and yet he was made fun of for doing this. We need, like Jehoshaphat, to follow the leader when it comes time to seek the Lord. Our leaders are asking us to pray about this, and we should thank God that we have leaders in America that want us to seek the Lord. But more importantly, we know from this example and from the New Testament that we are to pray about our troubles. In Philippians 4 verse 6, he says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, that includes coronavirus, in everything with prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. Jehoshaphat was now one fasting and bowing before the God he feared. We need to get a fear of God back in our souls that will buckle our knees so that we will pray. I want to challenge husbands to bow their knees and to bow their faces to the ground with their wives and pray about this problem that we're facing. It's a worldwide pandemic. And I would like to challenge us all as Christians